You're watching live now from Fox, and we are following some breaking news out of Iran. I do want to put this up on your screen here as the United States is imposing sanctions on 5 Iranian officials that accused of being behind the crackdown on protests and warned it was tracking Iranian leaders' funds being wired to banks around the world as President Trump's administration increases pressure on Tehran. Now, the U.S. Treasury Department in a statement said it imposed sanctions on the Secretary of the Supreme Council for National Security as well as Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and law enforcement forces commanders, accusing them of being architects of the crackdown. Now, President Trump has repeatedly threatened to intervene on behalf of protesters in Iran. I also did want to share with you here, as you can see on your screen, this is a post here from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and he did post a video message to social media just a short time ago. I do want to see if we do have it. My producer was working to see if we could grab this for you here on Live Now from Fox, and it looks like we do have it. So once again, here is that video message just posted to social media from the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
My message today is to the Iranian leadership on behalf of the people of Iran who cannot speak for themselves. Last March, we predicted that President Trump's maximum pressure campaign against the Iranian regime would accelerate an economic collapse. Since then, our sanctions efforts have been effective in slashing oil exports and cutting revenue. The currency and living conditions are in freefall. The early warning signs are already flashing in the Iranian economy. The regime continues to egregiously mismanage its economic resources with additional subsidies and price controls. The central bank is broke and printing money. Hyperinflation is next. Rather than building a prosperous Iran, the regime has chosen to squander what remains of the nation's oil revenues on nuclear weapons development, missiles, and terrorist proxies around the world. Civilians are rightly protesting mismanagement and economic collapse. President Trump stands with the people of Iran and has ordered Treasury to sanction members of the regime. Iran's leaders have brutally responded to peaceful demonstrations with violence, from mass shootings in the street to attacks on wounded victims in hospitals. Today's sanctions target 18 individuals and entities that the regime uses to evade sanctions on Iranian oil and divert proceeds from its energy sales away from the rightful owners, the Iranian people. Tehran's natural resources belong to its people and not its brutal dictators. Treasury will continue to target Iranian networks and corrupt elites that enrich themselves at the expense of average Iranians. This includes the regime's attempts to exploit digital assets to evade sanctions and finance cybercriminal operations. Additionally, President Trump has announced a 25% tariff on countries that continue to do business with Iran. Our message to the Iranian people is clear. Your demands are legitimate. You are protesting for a noble cause, and the United States supports you and your efforts to peacefully oppose the regime's mismanagement and brutality. Our message to the Iranian leaders is also clear. U.S. Treasury knows that like rats on a sinking ship, you are frantically wiring funds stolen from Iranian families to banks and financial institutions around the world. Rest assured, we will track them and you, but there's still time if you choose to join us. As President Trump has said, stop the violence and stand with the people of Iran.
And once again, that was that video just posted to social media a short time ago there from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. This action is the latest move targeting Tehran since President Trump restored his maximum pressure campaign on Iran, which includes efforts to drive its oil exports to zero and help prevent Tehran from developing a nuclear weapon. So if you are just tuning in here to Live Now from Fox, wanted to share this breaking news here with you. The United States is imposing sanctions on 5 Iranian officials that accused of being behind the crackdown on protests, and also warning it was tracking Iranian leaders' funds being wired to banks around the world as President Trump's administration does increase that pressure on Tehran. We'll continue to follow this here on Live Now from Fox.